After more than a decade and a half of international moves, I can say quite clearly and quite easily, there is a right way to move abroad and a wrong way to move abroad. And especially if we're going to be talking about Italy, there are some details that are very easy to overlook and many don't think about. I have spoken a little bit about this before, but I wanted to revisit this topic now here, towards the end of 2025, working our way into 2026. I'm Rafael Di Furia. This is another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter, and roll that intro. One of the most underrated things that I've seen when it comes to moving abroad, regardless of the country, but especially when moving to Italy, especially with how many people think that, oh my gosh, things can be so cheap in that part of the world. Have some savings behind you. Have at least, say, maybe 6 months if you can. Even better if you can get a year of savings behind you. You are going to find that there are going to be little things that pop up here and there when it comes to bills or how often bills might come, or even say if you need an apartment to rent. For those of you who are going to be needing a visa to be able to live in Italy, having a place to live will be part of the process already. But say if you're a European citizen or you're already an Italian citizen moving to Italy for the first time, but even if you're not in those situations, securing a place to actually call your own can be quite a challenge depending on where you're wanting to go. Not only because of lack of availability in certain major cities, but also because there are going to be many landlords who just simply don't want to rent to somebody who doesn't have money in the country. And when I'm saying money in the country, I'm not saying like, oh, you just put a bunch of money in a bank account in the country. I'm saying you don't have a pension in the country or you don't have a work contract in the country. Those will be golden. And for example, what if I have a pension from the US, or what if I have a business in, Timbuktu, wherever it's going to be? That to an Italian landlord is not going to seem so attractive because, say, for example, if you fall behind on your rent, there's not going to be a place where they can go directly and easily to start garnishing your wages. Because of course, a rental contract in Italy is not a small deal at all. It's actually quite a big undertaking. It's either 3 + 2 years or 4 + 4 years. You can cancel it after the initial 3 years or the initial 4 years. There are ways to cancel before then, but it's going to depend on the contract and the landlord. Everything really just depends on what your situation is. But one of the reasons why I do say having such a large amount up front for being able to live off of could be worthwhile is that, say you do get to Italy, if you are in the position where you don't need a visa to come to Italy and you can spend a couple months actually potentially searching for a place. I have friends who've done that in the past and even more recently where they've gone to Italy, they've looked around. It took them months to be able to secure an apartment, having to bounce around from Airbnb or temporary location to temporary location. And then there are going to be some landlords that might want to see a hefty deposit up front, especially if you don't have a job or contract in the country or your pension in the country. Although you may find that actually some landlords can become a little bit more flexible if you're willing to pay X amount of months ahead of time. I've heard of people offering 3 months, 6 months, 12 months in advance. I would say this is a little bit of a tricky thing to do because you want to make sure you have this on paper, and it does start setting up a little bit of an unhealthy expectation kind of overall. I mean, some of what we've been seeing in other countries when foreigners come in and having to do things different than the locals might, then it actually can make it much more difficult for the locals in the long run. And especially having seen so many places change with just a little bit of an outside influence and an outside influx coming into the area, I would say for those coming from abroad, it is worthwhile to be careful to make sure that they are not really being part of the problem and rather that they are kind of contributing to the status quo. Of course, in many episodes before, I've spoken about that you really want to spend time in the place that you are going to be. And so because of that, I won't go deeply into that in this episode. But one thing I do want to say is that even for me, I am someone, as I've mentioned in previous episodes, that I am able to look at a place online without ever stepping a foot in there. And after all of the international moves I've done, I can get a very, very good sense of whether that place could be right for me or not. Of course, no matter where you go, there are just going to be certain details that will be difficult, if not impossible, to figure out until you have your boots on the ground. But when it comes to Italy, I would say actually it goes up another little level. There are a lot of little details that go into life in Italy. I'm not saying that it is impossible. And yes, I've spoken about so many minor things, but these are things that many people overlook when thinking about a life in Italy. When you get used to it, it's nothing to think about. It becomes almost like second nature. If I were to personally move back to Italy, I would say that maybe I would want to spend a bit of time in a location before fully committing to it. Even for me, someone who's lived in Italy for years and who spent time in different places, if I were to try a new location, I would want to make sure that I'm going beyond just a vacation and actually spending a solid chunk of time there. But another thing that I would say would actually potentially be worthwhile doing, but of course this is not financial advice, this is just something that I might personally do if I were thinking about moving back to Italy, is to make sure that I would have a bank account before actually making the move there. I would say if you can have time to be able to go to spend in Italy, to really spend a fair chunk of time there, and then also be able to approach a bank in the town or city that you are planning on living in, and being able to sign up for a bank as a foreign resident. When you actually move to the country, things could actually be a lot more smooth during your transition. There are going to be certain things that are much more easy to get set up if you have a bank account already in place. And that's something like with the Codice Fiscale that I've spoken about in the past. I really do recommend having that in place before you come to Italy. But also before moving to Italy, I really do think it's worthwhile having a bank account because there are going to be certain things for utilities. Maybe if you set up a direct debit, you actually could get a better rate for certain, electricity, gas, whatever it might be. Or there are going to be other things like maybe home internet if you're going to be needing it, or TV. There are going to be certain things like that where you actually may have to have a bank account that they can withdraw from automatically every month. But another thing, of course, that actually can work potentially in your favor in another way is if you do have that bank account, you put some money in there and then you regularly are depositing it into it. It's not going to be the make or break with a landlord, but if you can show that as supporting kind of evidence that you can support yourself in Italy, that might help with some landlords, but there are going to be a lot of landlords who really just simply don't care about it. But in general, if you are very serious about living in Italy, having a bank account in the country can work. In the past, I have spoken about having a Wise account. I think a Wise account and an Italian bank account actually can work hand in hand together really nicely. I don't think that there's one single choice that's going to be perfect for everybody at this moment in time. However, there are going to be ways that you can try to make it easier for yourself. For example, if you have an American bank account and an Italian bank account, and you also have a Wise account, you can use the Wise account to potentially transfer more easily and for a lower cost than you might be able to otherwise. Again, this is not financial advice. This is just something that could be possible. It might be possible, and it might be something that I would potentially do if I were moving, for example, from the US to Italy. But again, I'm not telling you to do this. Of course, though, living in Italy isn't just about financial planning and how you're going to move around your money and making sure that you have enough money, but it's also budgeting your time and doing so efficiently, and how to plan the timing of your move the right way so that you don't run into so many bumps in the road. In Italy, I would say there are certain times of year that are less ideal to make a move, not even just to the country, but within the country. Summer, August especially, is really not a great time to make a move happen in Italy, but you could still potentially get some things going in July, and then September, things start to roll maybe after the first week, but then December is another time that I would really avoid, especially for government office things. Like, that's going to be a time in the year where it's really tough to get things done. Of course, August will be a tough time too to get things done in certain offices, but in December will also be another challenging time. But also take into consideration maybe the last couple weeks of November and the first week or so of January, but the first week and a half, 2 weeks, that's going to be maybe slower than what you might find in the end of November. You could still move, say, like end of October, beginning of November, but if you can't get everything done in that 1 month, you might find some challenges in December that could start piling up as the year goes on. I'm not going to say that there is a best time to move to Italy. It's just kind of make sure you don't move during those times, especially. But then another factor that has to do with budgeting time is making sure you have enough time ahead to get certain services installed. Like, for example, does the apartment that you're moving into already have electricity and gas and water set up, or will you have to be doing that from the get-go? That, depending on where you are, can take a little bit of time. Things are getting better, of course, but even for something like internet, they might tell you, hey, it's going to be at least a few weeks out before you can get that set up, but potentially you might be able to make an appointment for the week after or a couple days after. It's going to depend on where you are, the services available where you are. But one of the nice things in Italy, which is it's kind of a double-edged sword, is it's nice in one way, but sometimes if you have to rely on it, it's not the best option. There are internet companies that provide you full internet connection, unlimited everything through a SIM card. For example, one company comes to mind, AlpSIM, and I think potentially Vodafone might offer something similar where you can have your internet connection through a modem that you plug into the wall. I'm not talking about like one of those little puck cubes that you might have had in like 10 years ago or so, but an actual like modem router that has a SIM card in it that you can plug your computer and other things to, TVs, iPads, whatever it might be with Wi-Fi, that it would just, instead of plugging into a wall, it would connect to a tower. And so in certain situations where it might take a little while for you to get your internet connection set up, having that as a backup can be really nice. And then even, for example, a company like Iliad, you can get a couple hundred gigabytes for, I think, 15 euros a month or something like that. It's not the best pricing that I've seen in Europe, but I would say it is actually a very fair price. So make sure if you are someone, especially who's needing to work from home, that you are budgeting that time as well to make sure you know when you're going to have your internet connection, what kind of internet connection you're going to need. And even if you are someone who needs to have a fast internet connection at home, I know I talk about internet a lot. It's something that's very important for me in my life and the work that I do. But a lot of the main companies for internet service will actually have services on their website where you can input an address, see if it's covered, and if it's covered, what type of coverage it has. Is it through a copper wire? Is it through fiber? Is it just something through the air, through a cellular connection? There are going to be a lot of different options from a lot of different companies, and not every company is going to offer the same services at the same locations. For example, you could have one home or one apartment building that's serviced by two companies, but then couple blocks away, it might be serviced by a separate two different companies. And then it depends on what type of contract you're willing to go with. Some companies actually will lock you in for at least a couple of years. And then other companies will just say, hey, yeah, whenever you want to quit, you can leave. No strings attached. I would recommend highly to do your research and to ask all of those questions about what kind of contract, cancellation, this, that, and the other. Because when I left Italy, I had a contract that it was a whole mess of how it happened because I had moved from one apartment to another. The guy at the internet store signed me up for a new contract instead of moving my old contract. It was a whole song and dance, and I ended up having to pay in the end for almost, I think, a year of service after I left the country. So very annoying, and I didn't know exactly what was going on. And even every time I tried to contact the internet company, there was nothing. There was no answer. Zero. It was a headache and a half to try to handle from abroad. But one other thing that I would say also is worthwhile for many people who are moving to the country is that a lot of people get really excited, especially I notice Americans get really excited about this, especially if they're not from a city, that when they move to a new place, and this was me actually years ago when I first left the US, that I was like, oh my gosh, gonna have to get a public transport card so that I can use unlimited every month and that I'm not gonna have to worry about it. Having a realistic idea of how much you're going to use the public transportation and where it's going to take you and how useful it's going to be, it's worthwhile to take maybe a month or so to really get a solid idea if the value is actually there for you. Because if you only use it a couple times in a month, you're not going to be getting the value. If you're having to use it for work every day, then yeah, signing up for one of those monthly passes could very well be worth your while and lead to a lot of savings. It's just going to depend on your personal use case. And I would say even the first month to 3 months might not look like your average usage as the years go on, because especially in those first few months, you might have to be running around from office to office. Maybe you're going to take a taxi instead of a bus or a metro, just because maybe you can rely on getting there faster, or there's a strike or whatever it might be. Or if you have to go buy furniture and go to all different furniture stores, having that ability to understand what your realistic needs are instead of what your idealistic needs are, it can add actually a lot to your savings, because maybe you're going to go to a place and you're thinking you're going to be taking the metro or the bus every day, but then it ends up you only taking it maybe a couple times in a week. And in that point, in most places that I've seen, even in Europe, a couple times a week doesn't cover the value of having a full monthly pass. Although if you're going to be moving out to the countryside or a smaller town or village, then renting a car from the get-go could be actually worthwhile, because you're going to find, especially in a lot of small towns, that the public buses that are available might not take you so much locally, but to another town or to another area. And those might not run so frequently, once in an hour, a couple times in an hour, or once every few hours. And good luck on Sundays. There are just going to be certain places that don't have service on Sundays, and don't be surprised about that. Don't think that the schedule is going to be the same all 7 days of the week. Saturdays, things can be a little different. Sundays can be even more different. Holidays, just as different as Sundays, sometimes even less. So planning to have that car available to you, at least at the beginning, especially for getting groceries, furniture, some chairs, a table, whatever it might be, IKEA runs. It's worthwhile having a car at that initial stage. If you're in a smaller town or village, if you're in a city, that's going to completely change as well, because you have what is known as a ZTL, a controlled traffic zone that only certain people are going to be able to enter. And if you want to enter with your own car, you're going to need permission for that, and you're going to need to actually sign up and have your car able to go into those areas. In a lot of them, they do have certain hours where anybody can go in and out, but it's usually really early in the morning, or maybe some open hours on the weekends. It depends on where you are. So research what those details are, and if your new home, apartment, or whatever is going to be in one of those ETLs. Usually you only find them in major cities, but even you can find them in smaller provincial cities, but it's more likely going to be a center or a historic center. Like I said before, I've spoken about some of these topics about what I would do if I were to move back to Italy in the past, or if I were to move to a new country, what I would do differently. But I wanted to kind of visit this topic again, and I'm sure I will visit it again in the future. If there's anything that I haven't touched on in this episode, feel free to leave a comment down in the comment section below here on YouTube and share your thoughts. I mean, even if you agree with me or if you disagree with me, let me know. I'm always curious to hear what you guys have to say. And of course, thank you to those of you who helped to make these episodes possible through the one-time donations through rafaeldifuria.com/support, or an even bigger thank you to those of you who really helped to make this project possible through rafaeldifuria.com/Patreon for the monthly support, as well as to those of you who hit the like button and share these episodes with your friends, as well as clicking on the new hype button on YouTube. Those all help in their own way. Of course, I'm Rafael Di Furia. This has been another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. Stay safe and healthy out there, and I'll see y'all next time. Later.